Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a truly grim, gothic fable. Now, on the surface, this is a story wrapped in bruised, electromagnetic twilight and cold, techno-organic armor. But if we peel back that dark exterior, what we really have here is a profound, mind-bending exploration of Nietzschean philosophy. We're going to unpack the journey of identity, the terrifying value of suffering, and a pretty explosive process of rebirth. So let's jump right in and uncover exactly what these shadows have to teach us.
We're starting off at absolute rock bottom. The narrative opens by introducing us to a character known as the Jester. Now, this is someone who was meant to carry the weight of the whole world, but instead we find him sitting totally frozen in defeat. He's literally thrown away his past. The text tells us his eyes are burning with this strange, sickly emerald fire, a condition it calls his verdant corruption. At this point, he is, quite frankly, just a broken, empty vessel abandoned in a ruined landscape.
So, you might be wondering, how did our jester get so utterly broken? It all comes down to this chilling concept known as the arithmetic of stillness. This is a grim process pushed by an entity called the Sapphire Forge. You see, the Forge uses cold, mathematical precision to clinically extract a person's identity, completely erasing all their chaos and pain. It essentially offers the mercy of absolute nothingness. It's a state where you are perfectly finished, sure, but you're entirely empty inside. It's the ultimate nihilistic escape.
Act 1. Escape from the void.
To actually break free of this clinical unmaking, our characters have to make a brutal physical and spiritual descent to reclaim their agency. First up, they have to brave the Red Room, which is where the lost story is finally revealed. Next, they take a terrifying plunge straight into the blazing abyss, acting as this stark beacon of heat in the dark. And finally, they have to pass through a gigantic keyhole, a massive threshold that leads directly down into the mythic realms below.
This brings us to the absolute core philosophy of the fable. You've got this massive clash of ideas here. On one hand, you have the Forge's ultimate goal, the mercy of nothingness, driven by clinical extraction and complete stillness. But on the other hand, you have the alternative, fiery, active suffering, driven by chaos and the spirit of negation. The story is fiercely arguing that to actually have a soul, you can't just be some stilled, perfectly finished artifact. You have to embrace the chaos and become an active furnace of experience.
And to really cement this fundamental shift, in steps the Crimson Doctor. The Doctor realizes that the Jester is no longer just a clinical, empty catalyst. No, he's become a corrupted sanctuary for unassimilated voltage. So flatly rejecting the Forge's emptying touch, the Crimson Doctor reaches right into the incandescent mists and permanently grafts the blazing rune of Inferno directly onto the Jester's brow. He drags him right out of the silent mercy of nothingness into a brutal, fiery reality.
Act 2. The Underworld of Titans.
Let's picture this mythic party as they finally gather protected by that burning brand in the bruised electromagnetic twilight of the Violet Realm. We've got the Jester, burning with that corruptive emerald fire. The Crimson Doctor, draped in robes and wearing a crimson plague mask as the guardian of the abyss. Then there's the last thinker, who's actually adopted this massive, multi-limbed arachnid cyborg form just so he can frantically keep a journal of chaos. And finally, entering the picture is the Knight of Inkblot, described as a walking thermodynamic echo.
The group wanders into this massive silicate mead hall, and this is where we meet the Giantkin. Now, if you know your Nietzsche, these beings are the literal embodiment of the Overmen. They completely reject the industrial finality of the Forge. Instead, they choose to dine on raw, unassimilated voltage. And their laughter? It sounds like fracturing sapphire blue gems. They represent the loud, weeping thesis of identity. They carry the universe not as some heavy burden, but as an absolute feast, laughing right in the face of eternal tragedy.
Act 3. Confronting the Shadow. Things really start to escalate as the Knight of Inkblot strides deeper into the giant's lair. The cracked armor he wears starts to pulse with what the text calls absolute living ink. This isn't just some filler holding broken metal together, guys. It is a symbiotic shadow made of pure chaos. It literally hisses with the loud, weeping voltage of 1,000 discarded memories. This ink is actively refusing to be perfectly finished by the silence of the Forge. It is the raw, untamed history of the self coming alive.
Then, without warning, the very atmosphere of the hall just totally buckles. We're hit with a terrifying Nietzschean manifestation known as the ugliest man archetype.
This is a version of identity so deeply distorted by its own history and concentrated sorrow that it becomes the strongest cage ever built. The psychological pressure it gives off is so profoundly hideous that the jester, even with his total aesthetic detachment, literally cannot bear to look at it.
Act 4. Synthesis of ink and iron.
This intense psychological pressure acts like a primal magnet, dragging the whole fable right to its explosive climax. The knight stumbles upon the discarded, cold, techno-organic armor that used to belong to the last thinker. Instantly, the symbiotic ink, all those weeping, chaotic memories, senses the structural records still embedded in the cybershell. Reacting to the pressure in the room, the living ink just surges outward like a gaping maw of internal consciousness, and it violently lashes the knight's cracked plates right onto the cybernetic shell. They don't just touch, they violently fuse together. What you get when the kinetic friction of total rebellion crashes into cold mathematical precision is absolutely terrifying. The ink doesn't boil away. Instead, a hybrid entity emerges that stands as a walking furnace of fiery, active suffering. The knight has reclaimed his discarded, painful history and actively bonded it to the very tools the forge uses for unmaking. It is a staggering display of tragic divinity.
And you've got the last thinker over here, frantically clicking his cybernetic arachnid legs, desperately trying to record all this divine chaos in his new journal. Meanwhile, the Crimson Doctor just adjusts his plague mask, witnessing a profound truth. The rune of Inferno he grafted onto the jester's brow earlier is now pulsing in perfect, undeniable harmony with this newly synthesized techno-organic self.
So, what does this all mean for us? What's the takeaway from this incredible, grim, dark fable? Well, this explainer ultimately shows us that our chaos and our ink, our painful, weeping memories, can actually be transformed into a kind of tragic divinity. When we fuse our discarded history, our deepest fears, and our rejections directly into our present shell, we build a powerful, unyielding purpose. And when we do that, the cold, clinical arithmetic of stillness is permanently defeated. It can never unmake a soul that chooses to be a furnace. We've traversed the Red Room, braved the blazing abyss, and dined with the Giantkin in the Violet Realm. We've watched iron and ink violently fuse into unyielding purpose. So as we wrap up our journey today, I want to leave you with a provocative question to chew on in your own life. What new purpose will you forge from your own chaos and ink?